Kayla Solon had 3 hours before the council's trackers reached Frostpine Wilds. That was the plan. What wasn't in the plan was the wolf pup drowning in the frozen creek. Snow knifed sideways across the valley, thick and hostile, wiping out her tracks almost as fast as she made them. Her lungs burned with cold. Her shoulders ached under the weight of the pack strapped across her back. She kept moving, counting each breath to hold the rising panic down where it couldn't climb into her throat. 3 weeks since the rejection mark. 2 weeks since Lord Thorian Drake's hunters picked up her scent. One day, she'd stumbled into this forgotten piece of wilderness where maps stopped and survival turned into guesswork. White and gray. That was all she saw. Trees are heavy with ice. The faint ribbon of the creek twists between rocks, and there is a sound. Not the groan of burdened branches or the hiss of snow on water. Thin. Frayed. A small, struggling sound. Kayla slowed, boots crunching on crusted snow. Her breath ghosted in front of her as she followed the noise to the creek's edge. 20 feet out, a fallen log had jammed between 2 boulders, forming a small island in the black current. On it, something dark and trembling clung to slick bark. A wolf pup. Silver gray, soaked to the skin, no bigger than a loaf of bread. Its fur lay flat against its ribs. One paw slipped, and it lurched, nearly tumbling into the water before it scrambled, claws scraping desperately for purchase. Another cry cut across the air. The logic was simple: walk away. She had barely enough food for herself. She had a cabin to reach, a fire to build, a life to salvage. The winter would kill her fast if she wasted strength. The wolves of this forest were not her problem. She turned to leave. The pup's eyes followed her. Amber. Clear. Scared, but awake. The log shuddered as the current tugged at it. It wouldn't stay pinned for long. Kayla stood still, jaw tight. Idiot, she muttered to herself, already untying the leather straps around her boots. She set them carefully on the bank beside her waterskin. Her only cloak came next, a worn umber thing she folded quickly to keep it dry. Her fingers were stiff, but she worked fast. Her father would have said this was exactly the sort of reckless impulse that made the council brand her in the first place. Her omega nature makes her soft. Her empathy makes her weak. Her disobedience makes her dangerous. The council agreed. Lord Thorian agreed. They made a bargain over her head like she was livestock. She'd run instead. The water hit like knives. Cold shot up her legs, stealing the air from her lungs. The creek, fed by mountain melt, didn't care that she was desperate. It just kept moving. Her feet went numb almost instantly. She pushed forward anyway. "Stay," she shouted, voice shredding in the wind. "Don't move." The pup couldn't hear the words, but it stilled, pressing itself lower against the log, tiny claws fighting for grip. The rocks under Kayla's bare feet were slick with algae and ice. The current shoved against her thighs, then her waist, trying to drag her downstream. Her skirt turned to dead weight, tangling around her legs. 2 more steps. 1. She reached out. Fingers grazed the rough bark, then clamped down hard. The pup bared its teeth in a tiny, shaky warning. "I'm not going to hurt you," she said, breath coming in white bursts. "Come here." It didn't understand, but it didn't bolt either. That was enough. She slid her other arm around it and lifted. The pup weighed almost nothing. Just cold bones and wet fur and pure panic. She drew it to her chest. The rapid hammer of its heart thudded against her ribs, frantic and fast. "Got you," she muttered. The trip back felt twice as long. The current shoved harder now that her balance was off. Her legs screamed from effort and cold. Her teeth clicked uncontrollably. Each step was a fight not to go under. When her foot finally hit the muddy bank, she almost sobbed with relief. She clambered out of the water, legs shaking. The storm was fully awake now. Wind tore at her hair. Snow stung her face like grit. The pup whimpered once and tucked its nose into the hollow of her throat. Kayla scooped up her cloak and boots one-handed, clutching the pup tight with the other. Blood streaked its front paw, a clean cut from something hidden in the creek. Its wet fur chilled her through her soaked dress. "You're safe now," she whispered, wrapping her cloak around both of them, bringing the animal into her warmth. "I've got a fire waiting. And food. Not much, but enough to share." The pup burrowed closer. For the first time in weeks, the weight of another life pressed against her, small but real. It made the isolation less like a void and more like a pause. She headed back into the trees, following the markers she'd carved into trunks earlier, 3 diagonal cuts, then a vertical line. Her trail. The cabin emerged through the curtain of snow, a squat shape built half into the hillside, old timbers sagging under white weight. Abandoned. Unclaimed. Hers, for now. Inside, dust coated every surface. Old claw marks raked the lower walls where some animal had denayed seasons ago. The single hearth leaned crooked, half collapsed, but she'd spent yesterday evening stacking rocks and patching cracks. It drew smoke and held heat. That was enough. Kayla set the pup down on a folded blanket in the driest corner of the room. It wobbled, then collapsed into a small, shivering ball. "Stay," she said gently. Her hands shook as she built the fire. Kindling, twisted bark, the last of the dry sticks she'd gathered and sheltered under the eaves. The flint sparked on the third strike. Flame caught, then spread, orange light licking up to paint the rough-hewn walls. Heat began to push back the cold. She shrugged out of her soaked dress, teeth still chattering, and pulled on the driest shirt she owned. It wasn't much, but it was better than ice in cloth form. She wrapped the pup in the other shirt as her spare and tucked it closer to the fire, but not too close. Its eyes followed her as she moved, wary but no longer wild with fear. "You're all right," she murmured. "You made it." It blinked slowly, then sighed, head dropping onto its paws. Kayla barred the door with the heavy wooden beam, checked the warped window, and set her small store of supplies where she could see them: dried meat, a handful of nuts, 2 sad-looking apples, water in a dented canteen. It wasn't enough. She'd stretch it anyway. Outside, the storm roared. Inside, the fire crackled. For a brief moment, she let herself breathe. Then the forest went quiet. Not quieter. Not. The wind shifted, the snow paused, quiet. Empty. The constant background hum: wind and branches, distant water, shivering leaves, cut off in an instant, as if someone had thrown a blanket over the world. The air in the cabin thickened. Kayla straightened slowly. The pup's head snapped up. Its ears pricked forward. Its body went from limp to tense in a heartbeat. "What is it?" she whispered. The pup didn't move. Outside, something stepped. Not the shuffle of random wildlife or the chaotic crashing of a deer. Heavy. Measured. Purposeful. Too heavy for wolves. Too soft for men in armor. The hairs on Kayla's arms lifted. She grabbed the iron poker from beside the hearth and moved toward the window. The glass was warped and fogged, but she could still see out in blurred shapes. Shadows moved against the snow. One shape. Then another. Then more. Her grip on the poker tightened. A figure passed directly in front of the window. Tall. Broad-shouldered. Upright. But wrong somehow. The way it moved weighed in the wrong places, balance too easy, too fluid made her stomach knot. The fire snapped behind her. The pup pressed itself against her calf, silent. The shadow stopped. Through the distorted glass, Kayla saw it turn toward the cabin. It didn't rush the door. It didn't pace. It simply stood there, still as stone, watching. Her heart hammered so hard she could feel it in her teeth. Seconds stretched. Then the figure moved on, disappearing into the white blur beyond the window. The footsteps faded. But the silence stayed. The forest held its breath. Kayla swallowed, throat dry. She backed away from the window and slid down the wall until she hit the floorboards, poker still in her hand. Her pulse slowly steadied. Whatever was out there had seen her. Seen the fire. Seen the pup. Her stupid, impulsive act of mercy had been watched by something else. Something that didn't fit in any story the council had ever told about wild animals and dangerous men. And it wasn't going to be forgotten. Quick break, my wild-hearted listeners. You're watching the story of a rejected Omega on the run who just saved the wrong wolf in the wrong forest, and caught the attention of something that's definitely not human. Before we dive further, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. What lesson do you see already? Is kindness a weakness here, or the one move that changes everything? And if this world is pulling you in, hit subscribe, like, and share so you don't miss what happens when the Alpha King's wolves finally step out of the trees. Alright. Back to the fire, the cabin, and the past that chased Kayla here. 3 weeks earlier, Kayla Solon had stood barefoot on cold stone in the council hall and watched them decide her fate as if they were picking a new rug for the foyer. The chamber was all polished marble and banners stitched with the council's crest, black thread forming a mountain and a broken chain. 20 elders sat in a curved row on raised seats, watching her from above. Her father stood to the side. He didn't look at her. A clerk read from a long parchment. Kayla Solon. Born Omega. Registered at 16. No alpha claim. No pack claim. No mating bond manifest. Considered surplus under the new accords. The word surplus landed like spit. One elder, a man with iron gray hair and eyes like cold tea, lifted his gaze to her father. Lord Solon, he said, you've received the council's offer. Her father's jaw clenched. Yes. Lord Thorian Drake has agreed to take your daughter into his estate in exchange for mineral access in the Eastern Ridge. Take. Not marry. Not protected. Take. Kayla stared at the carved lines in the floor so she wouldn't say something that would make this even worse. Thorian Drake. Old enough to have buried 2 wives. Hungry enough to buy an Omega like a parcel of land. An elder turned to Kayla. You understand the terms? Kayla lifted her head. I understand you're trading me for a hole in the ground, she said, voice flat. Her father flinched. The elder's mouth tightened. You were born Omega, he answered. You know what that means. She did. It meant softer bones, sharper instincts, a scent that told alphas to claim and councils to calculate. It meant never being allowed to forget she was something to be used, not someone to be asked. But it didn't mean property. Not in her own mind. She held the elder's stare. What if I refuse? She asked. The hall shifted. The elders looked at each other. One of them made a small, irritated noise. Your refusal would make you a rogue, the chairman said calmly. Rogues are rejected by all packs. That includes protection, access, and rights. So, Kayla said, if I say no, I'm not a person anymore. Words, the chairman replied, do not change what you are. Only your place. She almost laughed. Then I refuse. Her father finally looked at her. Kayla. No, she cut in. You want my land. You want my blood. You don't want me. So I refuse. The elders didn't shout. They didn't debate. They didn't even look surprised. The chairman nodded to the clerk. Branding, then. 2 guards stepped forward. One carried a long iron rod. At the end of it, the council crest glowed orange from the heat of the coals. Kayla stood very still. Last chance, the chairman said. Her father's voice came out rough. Kayla, don't. You made your choice, she said quietly. I'm making mine. They took her wrist. The iron hit the skin. Pain flared so sharp it stunned the breath out of her. For a moment, the world narrowed to the smell of her own burning flesh and the hiss of hot iron against sweat. The mark left behind was a small black mountain with a broken chain beneath it. Clean. Precise. Final. Rejected. Official. An Omega no pack would claim. A woman the council no longer had to protect. The elders moved on to the next agenda item as if they'd just stamped a form. Her father didn't touch her as they left the hall. Her future, in their minds, belonged to Lord Thorian, whether she liked it or not. That night, she opened the back gate, took what she could carry, and walked into the dark. Now, in the cabin in Hollow Bend, Kayla stared at the tiny wolf sleeping near her fire and wondered how far Thorian's reach stretched. The pup twitched, chasing something in its dreams. Its paws moved, bumping the folded shirt. Your trouble, she murmured. It snuffled and rolled onto its back, exposing its belly without opening its eyes. She wasn't sure whether to laugh or cry. Dawn came grudgingly. Cold light seeped through the warped glass, turning the room a washed-out gray. Kayla woke to more warmth than she expected. The fire burned high, logs stacked neatly in a way she did not remember doing. She pushed herself up on her elbows. The door bar was still in place. Her knife lay beside her bedroll where she'd left it. The pup slept in the nest of cloth, ribs rising and falling slowly, tiny nose wrinkling when the wind howled. Nothing else looked disturbed. Then she saw it. A strip of fresh meat hung from a nail by the door. Dark red. Still bleeding slowly onto the wall. Her pulse jumped. She hadn't hunted. She hadn't opened the door. There were no footprints in the drift under the window. She rose, poker back in her hand, and edged closer to the door. The window glass was still cloudy, but daylight made it easier to see. Her breath caught. Outside, in a wide ring around the cabin, wolves sat in formation. Not prowling. Not pacing. Sitting. A dozen, at least. Maybe more. Their coats ranged from pale gray to almost black, thick with winter fur. They faced outward, not inward, as if guarding the cabin instead of circling prey. At the center of the ring lay a deer carcass. And at the center of everything, directly in front of her door, sat one massive black wolf. Its shoulders were as high as her waist. Its fur looked almost matte in the snow, swallowing light. Scars broke the smoothness in pale lines. Its eyes, even at this distance, burned amber gold. As she watched, the black wolf rose and picked up the deer by the throat. It carried the carcass easily to the doorstep and laid it across the snow. Then it bowed. Head lowered. Front legs bent. A clear, deliberate gesture. An offering. Kayla's fingers went numb on the poker. Wolves didn't do that. Not in any story she'd ever heard. The black wolf held the bow for a heartbeat longer, then straightened. It lifted its head. Its gaze found the window. Gold eyes and human awareness met hers across the frost-blurred glass. The wolf's body began to change. The sound was wrong. Wet and grinding. Bones shifted under fur. Legs straightened. Spine twisted and reshaped. The thick coat seemed to slide backward, revealing skin beneath. Kayla stumbled back, hitting the table behind her. Fur receded as if drawn away by invisible hands. Muscles reformed. Shoulders broadened. The muzzle shortened into a human jaw. Within seconds, the animal's silhouette became a man's. He stood barefoot in the snow, bare-chested despite the cold, wearing only rough leather trousers that rested low on his hips. Scars covered his torso, slashes, crescents, burned patches. Each one a story of something that tried to kill him and failed. His hair was black, tangled, brushing his jaw. His cheekbones were sharp. His mouth was set in a neutral line. His eyes stayed exactly the same. Amber gold. Bright. Watchful. He didn't shiver. Didn't look uncomfortable. He tilted his head slightly, nostrils flaring as he scented the air. Then his gaze focused on the window again. On her. Kayla froze. He raised one hand, palm flat against his chest, and bowed, just as he had in wolf form. Slow. Controlled. Respectful. Then he turned away and walked back toward the tree line. His movements were too smooth to belong fully to a man. Each step was silent, confident, in tune with the snow and terrain in a way no human hunter ever managed. The wolves stood as one and fell into formation around him. In less than a minute, they vanished into Frostpine's white and shadow. Only tracks remained. Wolf prints. Bare human footprints. A drag mark where the deer had been. And the slow drip of blood from the strip of meat hanging by her door. Kayla lowered the poker. Her hands shook. She sat down hard on the floor. The pup yawned and scooted closer, pressing against her thigh. She looked at it. Same amber eyes. Same gold ring around the pupil. You're one of his, she whispered. The pup licked her knuckles and curled up against her. Her heartbeat slowly stopped rattling her ribs. Shifters belonged in stories. In old warnings. In songs sung low around fires to keep children from wandering into the woods. Not in her reality. Not in an abandoned cabin. Not circling her as if they were guarding her instead of hunting her. But stories didn't drag themselves through snow to leave food on your doorstep. Stories didn't see you save one of their young, and decide you mattered. The days that followed blurred into a cautious pattern. The wolves didn't come inside. They didn't howl at her door or leave messages scratched into her walls. But she felt them. Tracks circled the cabin in widening rings. Fresh meat appeared on the nail by the door every morning, sometimes rabbit, sometimes strips of deer, once a chunk of boar. Her fire never burned out at night. She'd fall asleep to the crackle of low flames and wake up to a carefully rebuilt stack and embers glowing hot. She tested the door, checked the window latch, searched for wet footprints on the floorboards. Nothing. Whoever tended the fire didn't come in the normal way. Outside, she saw them sometimes at the edge of the trees. Silhouettes moving between trunks. Low shapes pacing. Now and then, the black wolf himself emerged, walked the perimeter, sniffed the air, and disappeared again. He never approached the cabin in human form. He didn't need to. Kayla started to understand the rhythm of their presence. The way the forest's silence meant they were close. The way the normal sounds of wind and birds only returned when they slipped away. They were watching. Waiting. Guarding. She didn't understand why. But she'd spent her whole life surrounded by people who pretended to protect her while sharpening knives under the table. The wolves felt more honest than any of them. One evening, snow fell slower. The storm thinned. Kayla sat near the hearth, mending a tear in her cloak. The pup, now stronger and less skin and bone, chewed on a stripped branch in the corner. A soft thud sounded at the door. Not a knock. More like something heavy set down on the threshold. Kayla rose, slid the bar aside, and opened the door a crack. No one stood outside. No paw prints too close. No human footprints. Just the edge of a fresh carcass. Another deer, throat cleanly torn, body untouched. She stepped out, breath steaming in the cooling air. The forest watched. She couldn't see them, but she knew. Her voice came out steady. "Thank you," she said to the tree line. Snow shifted on a branch. A shadow moved. Two amber eyes glowed faintly from under the boughs. Not a trick of light. Watching. Listening. Kayla dragged the deer inside, shut the door, and dropped the bar back into place. Her hands worked on autopilot, skinning, cutting, setting aside strips to smoke. The pup hovered close, tail twitching, eyes bright. She fed it first. It is a habit now. As she worked, she found herself talking. Not long speeches. Not outpourings. Just simple things. "That scar on your paw is healing," she told the pup. "Your trouble, you know that?" It snorted into the meat. She smiled. "You and your king out there." The word slipped out before she could catch it. King. She didn't know where it came from. No one had introduced him. No official title had been announced. But the way the others moved around him, the way the wolves formed around his position, the way he held himself. He wasn't just a stray shifter with a large pack. He was something else. She glanced at the window. Snow blurred the world into white again. "Whatever you are," she said quietly, "I hope you stay on my side." Snow fell through Frostpine Wilds in a ceaseless curtain of white, muffling every sound beyond the cabin walls. The world outside looked untouched, silent, cold, and deceptively calm. Inside Hollow Bend, firelight painted orange arcs across wooden beams as Kayla sharpened a salvaged blade against a whetstone. The wolf pup slept curled beside her boots, belly finally full, wound nearly healed. For the first time since she escaped the council, Kayla felt a fragile sense of rhythm forming. A life made from scraps, fire, food, the pup, the distant eyes watching from the trees, but a life that belonged to her, not to Lord Thorian Drake or the council elders. That illusion broke the evening the snow stopped falling. The pup stiffened before Kayla heard the footsteps. Not forest steps. Not wolves. Something heavier. Unsteady. Mismatched. Kayla reached for the knife. She had barely stood when the door creaked open. A shape filled the threshold. Ronan Veilheart. In human form, not wolf. He leaned one shoulder against the frame, breath harsh, chest rising in ragged pulls. Blood streaked his left side, dark, thick, dripping steadily from a long gash across his ribs. Snow clung to his bare skin in hardened crystals. Kayla froze. He wasn't attacking. He wasn't shifting. He wasn't demanding entry. He was trying not to collapse. The pup darted to him, whining, pressing itself against his leg. Ronan's hand dropped to the pup's head in a weak stroke. His fingers left a smear of blood on its fur. Kayla closed the distance in 2 steps. "Inside," she said, voice low, steady. Ronan didn't argue. He let her guide him in, one arm draped heavily across her shoulders, boots dragging against the floor. He never looked away from her face. Not hungry. Not threatening. Focused. A watchfulness that felt instinctive, not strategic. She lowered him beside the hearth. He braced one hand on the floor to keep upright. Up close, the wound looked worse. Deep. Clean slice. Not done by claws or branches. A blade. She grabbed water, cloth, thread, and the small tin of powdered herbs she carried from her old home. Ronan watched every movement, tracking her hands, her steps, her breath. The golden ring in his irises brightened with pain each time she pressed near the wound. He didn't growl. He didn't flinch. He simply watched her, eyes steady. His breaths came shallow, but controlled. His jaw stayed locked. He refused to fold under the weight of injury. Kayla worked. No hesitation. No wasted motion. She cleaned the wound, pressed the cloth down to slow bleeding, and reached for her thread. Ronan's eyes followed the needle as she threaded it, but he didn't resist when she leaned in. She spoke simply, voice even. "Hold still." He nodded once. That was all. No monologue. No declaration. No plea. Just acknowledgement. She stitched the wound with quick, sure movements. Thread pulled skin together. Cloth soaked with blood. The pup paced between them, whining softly. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, Ronan's breathing steadied. Kayla tied the final stitch and exhaled slowly. He didn't thank her, not with words. Shifters rarely used speech. They communicated through presence, posture, and eyes. Ronan met her gaze again. The firelight caught the gold in his irises. He lifted one hand and lightly touched her wrist. Not possessive. Not dominant. Recognition. A simple mark of acknowledgement between equals. Kayla didn't pull away. She cleaned her tools, threw bloody clothes into the fire, and checked the door again. Tracks outside. Heavy. Humans. Ronan followed her movement, his posture shifting. Shoulders straightening. Muscles bracing. His hand pressed to the floor, ready to rise. Kayla returned to him. "You're staying down," she said. His eyes flicked to the window, then to her. He didn't obey, but he didn't rise either. He waited. Waiting was an agreement. She dampened another cloth. He held still while she wiped blood from his arm and chest. The scars spread across his torso told stories she didn't dare piece together. Slashes from old battles, punctures from claws, burns from silver, faint lines from weapons she didn't recognize. This man had endured the kind of violence the council only whispered about. When she finished cleaning him, he shifted to sit a little straighter. His breathing evened. His focus sharpened. The forest outside seemed to warp around him, as if the wild bent itself toward its king. Kayla saw understanding dawn in the pup's eyes first. It nudged Ronan's knee, whining. Ronan's fingers brushed its head, and the pup relaxed at once. He looked at Kayla. He pointed toward the window. Then toward his nose. Then toward his wound. Short gestures. Clear message. Not hunters. Trackers. Councilmen. Kayla's breath hitched. Her hand tightened around the damp cloth. Ronan leaned closer, eyes locked on hers. Snow melted in streaks down his shoulders. Heat radiated off him now that the fire touched his skin. His injuries weren't enough to dim the intensity in his gaze. His next gesture was simple. He tapped her wrist. Then her chest. Then placed his hand flat to the floor. "Stay inside." Kayla shook her head. "No." He blinked, slow, unreadable, and a low exhale left him. Not frustration. More like recalculation. He wasn't used to Omega refusals. Kayla picked up her blade and checked its edge. His jaw clenched. She didn't explain herself. She didn't need to. The forest went silent. Ronan's posture shifted in an instant. He stood. Not fully steady. Not fully healed. But on his feet. Barefoot. Bare-chested. Ready. The pup went rigid, fur bristling. Kayla gripped the blade and moved quietly to the side of the door. A faint crunch of snow outside. Boots. Not one pair. Several. Ronan lifted his hand, fingers spread, signaling Kayla to stay behind him. She didn't move. The door rattled as something hit it lightly. Not a battering. A test. A check for weaknesses. A voice spoke from outside, controlled, measured, far too calm for the danger it carried. Kayla Solon. By order of the council, you are to be taken back into custody. Step outside. Kayla stiffened. Ronan stayed silent, chest rising and falling slow and deep. Another voice, rougher, less patient. We know you're in there. If you don't come out, we'll drag you out. Kayla's fingers tightened on the blade. Ronan took one step forward. A low growl built in his chest, not a threat, not a display, but a warning that vibrated through the floorboards. Outside, the men hesitated. The one who spoke first tried to steady the group. We're armed with wolfsbane. Don't force this. Ronan's growl deepened. The pup snapped its teeth quietly. Kayla's pulse hammered in her throat. She'd seen council hunters once. They didn't travel unprepared. They didn't retreat. And they never left without the target. Another voice, a command voice, cut through the cold. Break the door. Ronan moved before Kayla could register the shift. His body changed between one heartbeat and the next. No pause. No hesitation. No pain. His spine arched. His muscles lengthened. His chest expanded as fur rippled across skin. The air filled with the grind of bone moving in ways no human body should. The transformation took seconds. Then the man was gone. In his place stood the black wolf, the same wolf who bowed at her door, who left food every morning, who patrolled her nights. He was larger in the cabin than she expected. Massive. Heavy. A creature built for the deep wild, not human walls. Wolves outside the cabin stirred in answer, their bodies close, breath steaming under the window line. Ronan stepped in front of Kayla, fur brushing her thigh. He stood like a wall, solid, unmoving, unbreakable. The door splintered. Wood cracked inward under the force of a battering ram. Snow rushed in behind it. Hunters surged forward. Kayla raised her knife. Ronan launched. The clash was fast, brutal, terrifying. No monologues. No banter. No speeches. Only action. Claw. Blade. Snow. Blood. Ronan hit the first hunter with full weight, knocking him backward into another. The pup darted under Kayla's legs, snarling at boots and slashing metal. Kayla stayed close to the wall, striking only when a hunter turned toward her. Her blade sank into exposed leather at the shoulder of one man. He cried out, swinging wildly, but Kayla ducked under the blow and rolled away. Ronan tore through the second hunter's arm, sending the man stumbling back into the snow. A flash of green glinted in the firelight. Wolfsbane. Kayla shouted before she could stop herself. Left. Ronan twisted. The poisoned blade grazed his flank instead of piercing deep. He yelped once, but then he was on the attacker, jaws locking onto the man's forearm, crushing bone. Another hunter lunged for Kayla. She ducked under the swing, slammed the pommel of her knife into his throat, and shoved him into the doorframe. Shadows streaked across the snow outside. More wolves. More than before. 12. 24. Forming lines. Blocking escape. Ronan drove the poison blade hunter backward through the door. Snow sprayed where bodies hit the ground. The wolves closed in around Ronan like an army tightening formation. Kayla dragged the wounded pup away from the fray. It yelped but didn't stop watching the fight. Outside, chaos. Inside, blood streaked the floor. A hunter raised his weapon toward Kayla. Another command voice shouted. Hold her. But Ronan was faster. He barreled through the doorway, hit the hunter full force, and sent him crashing into a snowbank. Ronan's jaws snapped shut around his neck. The forest exploded with howls. The remaining hunters panicked, retreating toward the creek. Kayla ran to the doorway in time to see the last man stumble toward the frozen bank, a blade in his hand, eyes wide with fear. Ronan stalked him, golden eyes lit like fire. The hunter backed away. "Stay back," he shouted, voice breaking. Ronan didn't stop. The blade slipped from the man's trembling hand. Ronan Veilheart," he whispered. "Alpha King of the Frostline. Gods help us all." Kayla froze. Alpha King. The wolves behind Ronan lowered their heads in synchronized bow. The hunter stared at Kayla, face ashen, breath shallow. "If he's alive," the man said, voice shaking, "the council will burn this forest to root and stone to take him down." He looked at her again. "You need to run." He threw his blade into the snow and backed away slowly, hands lifted. "I never saw you. I never saw him. Go." He fled into the woods, swallowed by the dark. Ronan didn't pursue it. He stood in the snow, chest heaving, blood dripping from the poisoned cut on his ribs. Kayla stepped toward him. He shifted. Not slowly. Not cleanly. His body jerked mid-change, half wolf, half man, caught in the poison's grip. His legs buckled. He sank into the snow, breath cracking, eyes glassy. Kayla dropped beside him, hands already searching for infection lines. Dark veins spread out from the wound. Wolfsbane poisoning. Ronan's body shuddered. He forced himself onto one elbow, searching her face. He wasn't asking. He wasn't commanding. He wasn't warning. He was holding on. Barely. Kayla slid under his arm, lifting him with everything she had left. He was too heavy. He sagged against her. Wolves closed in, forming a circle around them. Not attacking. Waiting. Kayla's legs nearly gave out under the weight, but she forced herself up. Inside. Fire. Herbs. Cold compress. Anything. She dragged him across the threshold. The wolves followed but stopped at the doorway. None crossed it. Kayla dropped to her knees beside Ronan. His skin burned. His breath rasped. The dark lines spread toward his heart. She grabbed water, cloth, and all her herbs at once. Ronan's hand twitched toward her. Not stopping her. Anchoring her. His fingers brushed her arm, then went limp. Kayla worked. Grinding herbs, packing them against the wound, forcing snow into cloth to press along spreading poison lines. The cabin filled with the sound of his labored breathing. The pup pressed against his side. Outside, the wolves paced in tense silence. Kayla pressed both hands to the wound, praying without words, without hope, without anything but sheer refusal to lose the creature who had stood between her and death. Ronan's breath faltered. His chest tightened. The poison advanced. Kayla looked at the door. At the forest. At the creek. The cold. She made her choice. She pulled Ronan up with a strength that came from nothing but fear and determination and dragged him back outside. The wolves parted. Snow stung her eyes. Wind tore at her cloak. The creek roared like a beast. She stumbled to the water's edge. Ronan's skin burned under her hands. The water was near frozen. She stepped in. The shock made her eyes blur. She waded deeper. Ronan slipped from her grip. She caught him again by the shoulders. She lowered him into the water. His body arched. The poison shrieked through his veins. Kayla pressed a hand to his chest, holding him up. "Stay," she said, voice iron. Ronan's heart fluttered weakly beneath her palm. Then, silence. No heartbeat. The world around her narrowed. Snow. Water. Her hand on his chest. She pushed. One rhythm. Then another. Then another. The wolves howled. Ronan's chest rose. Then stilled. Kayla kept pushing. Heat from his body bled into the water. The forest held its breath. His chest rose again. A gasp tore from him. Air rushed into his lungs. His eyes opened. Gold flared like fire along his irises. He clutched her arm with a surge of strength. Kayla held on. She pulled him to shore. The wolves surrounded them, howling in sharp triumph that ricocheted through the trees. Kayla collapsed beside Ronan, breath shaking, hands frozen, body aching. He turned his head toward her. Their eyes met. Recognition. No claim. No command. Not dominance. Just recognition. Kayla's breath trembled. Ronan reached for her wrist. His fingers pressed lightly on the council's rejection brand. A silent understanding passed between them. The Alpha King knew exactly what she had suffered. He wasn't letting the council take her back. And she wasn't letting the world take him. The wolves bowed in a slow ripple, heads lowering toward frost and earth. Not to one leader. To two. Kayla exhaled. The night around them felt different. Shifted. Charged. Whatever they were, whatever they would become, began here. Two rejected lives. One pack formed around them. One war is coming for them both. They returned to the cabin as the sky lightened in the morning. Ronan could walk now, barely, leaning heavily against Kayla. Wolves flanked them. The pup trotted ahead, tail high. Inside, Kayla wrapped Ronan in blankets, stoked the fire, and set fresh herbs to brew. The poisoning slowed. But danger didn't. The council would send more hunters. Lord Thorian wouldn't abandon his prize. Ronan's survival would shatter the council's balance of power. Kayla looked at the window. Snow thickened across the forest, wind rising into a howl. The next storm would bring more than enough weather. It would bring war. If you're still deep in Frostpine with Kayla and Ronan, comment. What country are you watching from? What's the biggest lesson you've seen so far? And hit subscribe, like, and share so you don't miss out on other interesting stories. Dawn never arrived quietly in Frostpine Wilds, but on the morning after Ronan Veilheart's brush with death, the storm broke in a way that felt deliberate, as if the forest itself braced for what was coming. Kayla Solon tightened the last knot in the bandages across Ronan's ribs. His skin was warm again. The dark lines of wolfsbane poison had receded, shrinking back toward the stitched wound. He breathed steadily, the rise and fall of his chest powerful enough to reassure her he was no longer fading. He sat upright now, wrapped in blankets but alert, eyes tracking every shift of light near the cabin door. The wolves outside paced in tense lines. The pup lay across Ronan's legs, watchful, ears pricked at each gust of wind. Kayla closed the herb tin and set it aside. Ronan's eyes followed her movements. Golden. Deep. Alive. He tested his fingers against the floorboards, bracing to stand. She steadied him with one hand at his shoulder. He didn't resist her help, but he didn't need much of it either. He rose. Still unsteady, but standing. Kayla exhaled a slow breath. His survival was no miracle. It was the result of blood, decisions, stubbornness, and the silent pact forming between them. But whatever time they gained, danger moved closer with every second. Outside, the wind shifted. Kayla turned to the window. Shapes blurred through the tree line, bodies moving against the grain of the snowstorm. Not wolves. Not wild animals. Not Ronan's pack. Hunters. 6 at first. Snow-covered, armored, cloaks marked with the black mountain and chain insignia of the council. They fanned out silently, spreading across the forest floor in practiced formation. Kayla's pulse tightened. Council soldiers never traveled alone. A seventh figure appeared. Taller. Broader. Carrying a long horn strapped diagonally across his chest. The lead hunter. He raised his hand. The smaller units froze. Kayla dropped the blanket from her arms and reached for her blade. Ronan didn't shift. He didn't charge out. He didn't growl. He turned to her. A simple look. A clear signal. Position yourself. Be ready. Kayla moved to the left side of the door, bracing her back against the wall. Ronan stepped to the right. His breath stilled. His muscles coiled. Not fully human. Not fully wolf. Balanced somewhere between them. Outside, the lead hunter lifted the horn and blew 3 sharp blasts. A signal. Kayla's grip tightened on her knife. Ronan's gaze sharpened. The pack responded first. From the forest depths came the answering howl, deep, layered, echoing, dozens of voices rising in a call that shook frost from branches. The hunters didn't flinch. Their boots dug into the snow. Shields lifted. Blades drawn. They had come prepared. The lead hunter stepped forward. His voice carried through the storm. Kayla Solon, he called, you are hereby ordered to return to the custody of the council. If you surrender now, you will not be harmed. Kayla didn't move. Ronan's jaw tightened. The hunter's expression sharpened into disdain. You hide behind beasts, he said. But beasts fall like any creature. Do not force us to remove you by. He didn't finish. A wolf burst from the left flank and slammed into one of the hunters. Snow erupted in a spray of white. The line fractured. Ronan moved. Not a leap. Not a sprint. A flowing, seamless shift into motion, half human, half wolf, a terrifying hybrid that the hunters had never seen. Kayla followed, feet crunching on snow, blade ready. The assault unfolded in seconds. Wolves struck the outer hunters first, crashing into them with snapping jaws and relentless momentum. The men braced shields and swords, but the pack carved through their line faster than they could reinforce. Kayla reached the closest hunter before he turned fully toward her. Her knife sliced across his forearm, knocking his blade wide. She pivoted, drove her shoulder into his chest, and sent him back onto the snow. Another wolf lunged, pinning him before he regained breath. Ronan moved through the chaos like an elemental force. Not shifting completely, not returning to human shape. His bones flexed between states, fur and skin mingling, claws extending then retracting with each strike. He tore through a shield with his bare hands. He slammed one hunter into a tree so hard the bark cracked. He ripped another man's weapon from his grip and flung it aside. But the hunters had prepared for wolves. They carried silvered blades. And vials of wolfsbane dust. And ropes dipped in poison. They expected a pack. They had not expected a king. One of the hunters saw Ronan's movements falter for half a second, residual poison slowing him. He lunged. Kayla saw the blade angling for Ronan's throat. She didn't think so. She didn't calculate. She moved. Her weight drove into the hunter's side, knocking him off balance. His blade swung wide, cutting only a thin slice across Ronan's shoulder instead of a killing strike. Ronan caught the attacker's wrist. His claws extended. A blur of snow exploded to their right. A thick rope tightened around Ronan's neck. Another looped around his arm. A third around his torso. The hunters pulled in unison. Ronan staggered. The ropes were coated in wolfsbane mixture. Black scorch marks appeared instantly on his skin. His snarl echoed through the clearing. 3 hunters strained to drag him back. Kayla surged forward, slashing at the rope dug into his arm. The blade cut through the first strand. She swung again. Something heavy crashed into her side. The 4th hunter had been waiting. She hit the ground hard, snow punching the air from her lungs. The man's knee pressed into her back, pinning her. His hand clamped around her hair, yanking her face up toward the sky. "Stay down," he growled. Kayla twisted beneath him, planting her foot and wrenching her knee upward. She struck his ribs. Hard. He hissed and shifted his weight. Kayla drove her elbow into his jaw. The hunter grunted, grip slipping. She shoved backward, rolling under his arm and slammed her blade into the snow to help her pivot. She surged upright just as the hunter lunged again. Her blade caught his hand. He shouted, dropping the rope he carried. Kayla kicked him backward, sending him sliding into the snow. Ronan ripped through the 2nd rope. The 3rd rope held. 3 hunters pulled with every ounce of strength they had. Kayla ran toward the 3rd rope, blade raised. A shape stepped between her and the rope. The lead hunter. Broader than the others. Older. Steadier. Sword drawn in a stance that spoke of brutal experience. Kayla skidded to a halt. His blade angled upward in warning. "Stop," he said. Ronan snarled behind him, nearly dragging the 3 hunters who held the last rope. Kayla tightened her grip. The lead hunter didn't advance. His eyes flicked to the brand on her wrist. The Black Mountain. The broken chain. "Rejected Omega," he said quietly. "The council marked you disposable. Lord Thorian paid for your return." Kayla kept her blade steady. The hunter lowered his sword a fraction, not in surrender, but in consideration. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "Not with them. Not with him. Wolves don't protect outcasts. They kill them." Kayla shook her head. "You don't understand." The hunter's gaze sharpened. "You saved one of their pups," he said. And the Alpha King saw it. He turned fully toward Ronan now, eyes widening as if pieces fell into place. Kayla saw something shift in his stance. Recognition. Not of Ronan the wolf. Of Ronan the child. "You," the hunter whispered. "Your eyes." Ronan strained against the final rope, claws digging into the snow, breath steaming in thick bursts. The hunter lowered his blade completely. "I remember a shifter child with golden eyes," he said. 15 years ago. The council ordered us to kill the whole family. We did. Except the baby." Kayla froze. The wind seemed to pause with her. Ronan stilled, not relaxing, not yielding, simply pausing to listen. The hunter swallowed hard. "I couldn't do it," he said. "I carried you into the forest. Left you in a wolf den. Told the captain you were dead." The wolves around them growled low, tense. Kayla stared. The hunter looked at her, not asking for forgiveness, not offering excuses. "I didn't expect you to survive," he said. "But you did. And now you stand as something the council fears, a shifter king who commands an entire wild pack." He closed his eyes briefly, then took a slow breath. "I won't take you back," he said softly. "Either of you." He dropped his blade into the snow. "But more will come," he warned. "And they won't hesitate." He stepped back, palms open. "You need to run." Ronan's snarl eased. Kayla moved toward him. The hunter didn't follow. He turned and walked into the forest without looking back. The wolves let him pass. Silence pressed into the clearing. Kayla reached Ronan and cut the final rope. The wolfsbane coating burned her hand, but she didn't stop until the last strand fell. Ronan dropped to one knee, breath heavy but recovering quickly. The remaining wolves circled him, protective and alert. Kayla knelt beside him. His skin was marked with new burns, but the poison was no longer spreading. He looked at her, eyes burning in the storm. Kayla didn't look away. "No staying here," she said. "More are coming." Ronan nodded once. Agreement. No monologue. No plea. Just the shared knowledge of danger. Kayla rose and moved to the cabin. Inside, she shoved essential supplies into her pack: food, herbs, a second knife, 2 blankets. She wrapped her cloak tighter around her shoulders and slung the pack across her back. Ronan appeared in the doorway. In human form again. His shoulders were broader in the frame than the door itself. Snow melted in streaks across his skin. He reached for the pup, scooping it easily under one arm. Kayla looked around the cabin, the firestone walls, the patched roof, the door she had reinforced, the corner where the pup first slept. Her sanctuary. Her escape. Her home. But not safe anymore. Ronan stepped outside. Kayla followed. Wolves took formation, 2 flanking Kayla, 4 ahead, 6 behind. The largest wolves formed the outer ring. Ronan moved to her right. Kayla glanced at him. He didn't try to move in front of her. He didn't try to push her behind him. He walked beside her. Equal stride. Equal direction. Equal pace. Not his pack. Their pack. The forest path opened ahead, northward, toward the unmarked ridge the hunter spoke of. Kayla took the first step. Ronan matched it. The wolves moved as one. Snow fell thicker, but the path remained clear under their feet, footprints forming side by side. Behind them, Hollow Bend faded into white. Ahead, unknown territory stretched out, dangerous, cold, wild. But survival was no longer Kayla's burden alone. It was shared. The two walked together through the storm, their trails merging until the prints became indistinguishable, marking a single path. A rejected Omega. An alpha king raised by wolves. A pack bound not by dominance or fear, but by choice. They disappeared into the forest, leaving behind everything that tried to break them. Ahead lay months of winter, unclaimed lands, council pursuit, and a future neither could predict. But together, they would survive it. Together, they would build something new. The wolves howled as snow swallowed their figures. And the wilds answered with a wind that carried their vow deeper than any council decree.